Just prior to inauguration, former President Biden issued unprecedented pardons that create a constitutional crisis perhaps forthcoming. But one thing is for certain, the propaganda era is over. Today, we'll tell you why media companies simply do not know how to respond now that the new media will expose every attempt at corruption, the likes of which we have just suffered through. Get ready, folks. Analysis like you'll find nowhere else right now. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Pro Channel. Happy Inauguration Day. It is a great day to be in America, whether you are on the right, the left, the middle, wherever you might be. It's good to know that the wheels of the government continue to roll along, although some unprecedented things have happened. And those unprecedented things, I believe, came to pass in the way they did because they're still operating along the lines of believing that the legacy media, that they're the ones who are in charge, and you play by the rules of the old guard. Unfortunately for them, we're part of the new media, and the new media can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so we can talk about the inauguration, but we can also talk about these unprecedented pardons that came down earlier today from President, well, now former, almost, President Joe Biden. And, well, we've got Ron Coleman here, attorney who specializes in this sort of thing, I would suppose. Ron, is that fair? Wishy-washy, somewhere in the middle?
Very, very few people specialize in this area of law because it has so very, very seldom been the subject of any actual litigation. But there are people, there are law professors who've written on this stuff, but to a large extent, they're guessing because we are in absolutely uncharted waters.
Well, Ron, it's a pleasure, and really, I mean, we will all benefit from you having been here. All of our viewers, and so on behalf of everyone, thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure.
I really do appreciate it. All right, folks, as we get ready to get started, click the like button. We want this video to go far and wide because we want people to be as informed and well-informed as they can be, and we want to make that happen. Today, we're talking about the end of the propaganda because I think that's what we are watching happen in real time. Let me show you what we're talking about, folks. This is where we have been.
Please welcome Dr. Anthony Fauci. Hi,
Dr. Fauci. Hey, Jimmy. How are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you.
And here is where we are today, folks, from MSNBC.
As we continue this conversation, guys, we mentioned these pardons offered by President Biden this morning. General Milley has accepted the pardon, and now Dr. Anthony Fauci in a statement says he is grateful for the pardon he received from President Biden. He just received word from his attorney this morning. The pardon had gone through. He says, quote, "It feels good, and I'm grateful to the president for doing it." Also,
all right, so Anthony Fauci not only being pardoned, but he's happy. He's accepted the pardon, and this is all unprecedented. We'll explain why in just a moment. From Hot Air by Ed Morrissey, breaking Biden pardons Fauci, Milley, J6 committee, and it goes way, way beyond this. We've never seen anything like this. Ron can correct me if I'm wrong about that in just a moment. Let's see how that goes, but it says corrupt to the end, not to mention incompetent to the end too. In what can only be described as Joe Biden's last stunt, the outgoing president has issued what appeared to be the final pardons of his one-and-done term. While declaring that no one should take the pardons as an admission of guilt, Biden issued full pardons to former NIAID head Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, and every member of the House Select Committee on January 6th. That includes Liz Cheney, whose actions on the committee had drawn significant scrutiny in terms of potential witness tampering. President Biden issued pardons for officials who have clashed with President-elect Trump, using his final hours in the White House to help people he fears could face retribution by the incoming administration. That is the spin that is beginning to happen. Ron, these are pardons, though, that seem to have no limit, and they seem to have no crime attached to them. And I know that there are people out there who will say, well, this was done for Nixon, so maybe there is a precedent to some degree, but you know, if we find out later that Fauci was doing horrible, terrible, awful things that nobody knew about, or anybody else that's involved in this, and there are lots of people, because this even gets down into the staff that were working with these committee members on the J6 stuff, a wide swath of people, a motley crew of people have been carte blanche, pardoned in ways that we can't even really articulate. Help us articulate whether or not this is unprecedented, and what are the problems that you see with it?
Well, it certainly is unprecedented. It's mind-boggling. let's start out with reality. These pardons amount to a moral admission of guilt on behalf of the people who have been pardoned. There is a limit of the extent to which you can say we want to proactively negate the possibility of political retribution. At a certain point, it becomes ridiculous. And this is that point. I don't think anyone who watches this needs to know why that's the case. Legally speaking, it's really an open question. There is no precedent. Very, very few pardons have actually been litigated. I do one thing that I do think we have to get out of our heads. I mean, it's very questionable. Everyone saw the well, actually, you and I were on Valiant's show yesterday when he played that video of Mike Johnson explaining how Joe Biden made comments that suggested he really doesn't know what's going on and what he's signing. That's true. It's going nowhere, though. There is not going to be any finding by the Supreme Court, which is what it would have to be. It would have to be the Supreme Court, that any action taken by Joe Biden is ineffective retroactively because he was non-compos mentis, because he was mentally incompetent. That's not going to happen. The fact record isn't there. There's no adjudication, and there isn't going to be an adjudication. There is no constitutional provision for such an adjudication. In other words, even if there were a finding of incompetence, that is what the 25th Amendment is for. And the 25th Amendment wasn't invoked. And you might say, well, of course it wasn't invoked, because the very criminals who benefited from having a mentally vacant president were the ones who were charged with invoking it. So of course they didn't. Well, that just tells you that we need a better amendment. It doesn't tell you that, therefore, we're going to write a new one through judicial action. So let's take that off the table. We're going to assume that what is being represented to us as stuff that Joe Biden signed is stuff that Joe Biden signed. It's going to be tested. I don't doubt that at all. It would be preposterous not to test it. And it would also be politically advantageous for the Trump administration to test it, even if they lose, because they get to keep the crimes of the Democrats in the news very likely for the duration of the news cycle.
So let me ask you about that, Ron, specifically. So,
I'm sorry, for the duration of the election cycle. In other words, until the midterms.
Sure. So, one of the things I think we can definitively say is that this completely upends the narrative and the propaganda that we were presented with for years, and that the entertainment and media corporations were determined we were going to believe. Remember, Fauci was the science. You could not possibly take on Fauci because he was beyond reproach. He was essentially Saint Fauci. In fact, let me show this to you, Ron, real quick, and then I'll come back to the question. This is the sort of stuff that we were dealing with. People forget this. This is from Jimmy Fallon, or excuse me, Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel. Fallon's better than Kimmel. Let me play this for you just so we can all remember where we were. It's easy to forget the bizarro world we just came out of.
Elf on a Shelf keeps kids on their best behavior during the holidays. But in 2020, there's a whole new set of guidelines. Introducing Fauci on a Couchie, the holiday helper that keeps COVID in check.
Hey, excuse me. Don't go outside without your mask.
Nothing escapes Dr. Fauci's watchful eye.
Hey! Sneeze into your elbow. We don't want flying droplets.
You never know where he'll pop up next.
You only washed your hands for 14 seconds. Sing the happy birthday song twice. Happy birthday to you.
And this was presented as comedy, but it was also it was the reinforcement that everybody was supposed to be listening to Fauci. It was a very strange thing. Okay, so that's gone. Now we're into the political and legal landscape and how this plays out. So my question is, let's say that President Trump in the next 24 to 48 hours says, those pardons, we're not going to recognize them because they're illegitimate, because you cannot pardon en masse for, let's say, without any kind of, help me out, Ron, what would be the language here? Without any kind of accusation made. Like, you've got to have something substantive to apply the pardon to, and this is just nebulously like, hey, get out of jail free for everything forever. There's not even a chronology on this as far as I'm aware. They're just free for everything from birth to death.
This has never really been tested. The pardon power has always been considered to be very broad and very flexible. But you would think that there were some limit. If this were an argument in court, a judge might well ask, could the president pardon everyone for everything?
That's essentially that question now is here, I would say, because that's what Joe Biden has done.
In other words, could he empty out all the prisons, pardon everyone who's ever been convicted of any crime? Could he pardon all black people? Could he pardon all white people?
Ron, don't give him ideas. At the time of this recording, he's got another hour and a half.
So when we say that the pardon power is essentially limitless, that is the kind of thing that makes you stroke your beard and nod your head. But it does seem that there has to be some limit, some sort of rational limit. How to determine whether or not that limit has been reached here? It's going to be tested. Again, there's a political advantage and as well as a legal advantage, the legal advantage being that there may very well be a ruling that these seeming deficiencies in the pardons that have been granted are problematic. The open-ended nature of them in terms of time, in terms of conduct, the way that they basically operate to insulate an entire, really, what was intended as a bloodless coup from, criminal consequences, legal consequences. Well, not legal. I mean, after all, we have seen the tweets, and they are accurate, that state attorneys general are free to act. Civil litigants are free to act. And at least in theory, the people who have been pardoned can be subpoenaed and ordered to testify about things, at least certainly at the oversight level and probably even at the prosecutorial level, although who is left to prosecute at this point is hard to say. I mean, there are plenty of other people in Congress. I mean, I would be sniffing around looking for those people who have not been included in this net. I think there are some, including some sort of civilian types, people like David Corn, people from various other so-called journalism companies. So this, basically what Biden has done with these pardons is expanded the scope of hunting season in many ways.
Yeah. I was shocked that Mershon and Jack Smith were not part of the pardons that we saw. But
that is interesting.
Let me show you this, Ron, and you had highlighted this on X. Folks, if you're not yet subscribed to Ron Coleman over on X, you need to be one of the few remaining holdouts who changes their mind. Here's what we've got. This is from the Brookings Institute, and it's brought to us by BeyondReasDoubt. Got tongue twisted there on that one. It says, there are several reasons to expect that a broad preemptive pardon would be held invalid. This is in reference, by the way, to when Trump was leaving office and the arguments why he really could not or should not do these broad, vague, unbound kinds of pardons that we're seeing now out of Biden in mass. A pardon which doesn't specify in sufficient detail the offenses pardoned conflicts with the notion that accepting a pardon is an implicit admission of guilt. It is hard to say that a person who has accepted a pardon for any offense he or she may have committed has admitted guilt to an offense when we don't know what wrongful behavior has been acknowledged. Moreover, judicial language justifying preemptive pardons appears to have pardons for specific offenses in mind. In addition, it is unlikely that the framers would have vested in the president the power to issue pardons for offenses of which he was unaware. Amnesties which can benefit people whose identities are unknown must nevertheless specify the offenses that are forgiven. Nevertheless, the question of how specifically a pardon must detail the pardon crimes remains open, and the Nixon pardon, which has been generally accepted as legitimate, may figure importantly in any judicial discussion. So, Ron, thinking about the Nixon pardon, how does it compare with the pardons that we saw come out this morning?
Well, obviously, that's an important precedent. But when we say precedent, we have to keep in mind it wasn't a judicial precedent. It was a political precedent. There are areas that were not tested. Many aspects of the Nixon pardons were not tested. Most, in fact. What Gerald Ford wanted at that time was to just put everything behind us. But it wasn't as if the Supreme Court ever said, as far as I know, that Gerald Ford could give Richard Nixon a get out of jail free card for any conduct he would have ever committed, any conduct he would have ever engaged in. So it's a lifetime since then. Those of us of a certain age do remember those days, but there's going to be some really interesting legal business going on in the next few years.
Well, we've seen some interesting things. We won't play this one, folks, but I'll put it up on screen just so you can all remember where we were, what we've been through, what we watched, the level of propaganda, and just soak in for a moment, not what they're proposing here, but soak in for a moment that we went from Saint Fauci, the untouchable, and all of these people, part of the elite class, who they were beyond reproach. You could never question them. And today they're accepting pardons. Now, depending on which side of the aisle you're on and what your political views are, you're going to interpret this differently. Some people today are going to view this as Fauci needed this and the others, Mark Milley needed this because they're going to be persecuted, and this is to defend good people, good servants who were going to be persecuted, and so good for Biden or whoever it is that helped him sign the papers that he probably had no idea what were on them. And then on the other side, you may assess that these are people who may have partaken in actions that caused the death of millions, and therefore they should be looked into, and that this is a blockade against that. There will be various interpretations. One thing that I think we can conclude is that the propaganda failed. And if the thought was that they could continue the propaganda and they could continue to use the legacy media to manage this over the next 2 years, I think that's going to be a much harder job for them. I think the new media is going to ravage these pardons. And we could, like I said before, we can walk and chew gum. We'll continue to cover this. It's not necessarily in our forte, but it's such a big story, we're not going to skip over it, especially given the vast entertainment resources that were spent on making sure that you swallowed every bit of this as absolute truth, never able to question it. And by the way, whenever someone tells you you can't question something, you better question it all the more. Ron, I'll give you a final word on what we're watching today. And if you'd like to weigh in also on the inauguration, you're more than welcome to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the day means.
Well, it is the most significant inauguration of my lifetime because every inauguration brings in a new president, but the kinds of changes that are going to take place starting today, culturally and legally and politically, are, to use that word one more time, absolutely unprecedented. And I'm here for it.
There you go. Folks, we'll have a video out later today after the inauguration covering the Hollywood reaction, celebrity responses to the inauguration. And it's not going to be the typical video that you think, because many of the celebrities now are deciding they're going to get in line and be supportive. Some people that you would not expect. And we'll cover that as well, because things, they are a-changing. All right. Well, we want to thank you again, Ron, for having been here. It was a blessing to all of us to get your expertise here. Folks, go over and subscribe to Ron, not only on X, but also on YouTube. And he's often on with Valiant Renegade on Renegade Online on Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Folks, we hope you have a safe and warm, wherever you are. I think everywhere just about in the continental United States it's cold today. Stay warm, stay bundled up, stay safe, and soak in the day, whatever side you might be on. It is a big day, and I'm sure it has meaning to you. Help this video get more meaning and more traction across YouTube. Click the like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell, and drop a comment right on down below and let us know your thoughts. And it is wonderful, folks, that you can actually share your thoughts. That was in question, it was in doubt just a few years ago. Until the next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Clickbait, fraud, drama queen. Ugh, I wish there was a channel that was 5 to 6 minute news reads without the drama, frauds, and clickbait that could accurately let me know the current news, providing my crucial context utilizing all the different That Park Place contributors and creators.
Well, stupid, there is. It's the That Park Place YouTube channel, which will be going live real soon, so make sure you're subscribed so you can really stick it to the algorithms.
You're joking.
Nope.